Richard with RichMade Knives. Got another knife video for you. Today I am going to be showing off my newest knife that I finished. This one is a folding knife. It's a thumb stud opener rather than a flipper, which is what I've made in the past. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this knife, talk about the knife that I worked on before this one that I didn't have a whole lot of success with. I've got to do some remaking on it. So I will show off the knife that I just finished, talk a little bit about the next knife that I'm going to be working on, and just in general show you guys this knife and how it came out. So let's go ahead and get into this. I'm going to readjust the camera here so you guys can see my workbench and I can show this to you closer. I think that should give you a pretty good view. Okay. So this is the new folder that I just finished. You may have seen some pictures. I posted some pictures of this up on my Instagram account and on Facebook. So this is a thumb stud opener, so you'll notice that there's no flipper tab here on the bottom. This is a G10 on the presentation side. This is a layered G10. So when you buy this, the way that they make it is it's layers of different colors of G10 sandwiched together in a sandwich construction. So when you carve into it, you get the different colors. In this case, it's kind of a gray and then a layer of black mixed in. You can kind of see that along the edge there. You get that in the right light. There's a line of thin line of black, line of gray, line of black. So when you carve into it, you get those different color layers coming out in the. See if you can see that there. You can maybe see it in the corner there. So what I did is, as you know, I hand make all my knives, and I didn't really start out with a particular design other than the fact that I wanted to try out a little bit of a different geometry between the stop pin, the pivot and the stop pin. So what I did on this one is I moved the stop pin back here, set it back a little bit rather than being more forward. On a flipper, if you're going to use the flipper tab to stop the blade in the open position, you need to have the stop pin more forward, which creates some challenges because you've got to rotate, as the blade rotates around the pivot, you've got to clear the lock face on the screw. So it makes it more challenging when the stop pin is moved forward. And I wanted to try out number one, I wanted to try out just a straight thumb stud opener, but I also wanted to try out this new lock geometry where in the open position, you'll notice right here, get it in on the camera here where you can see it, this straight shoulder right here, as you open it, this shoulder rotates around and makes contact with the stop pin on the back side. And then in the open position, right here where the blade has a little straight edge right there, that's what makes contact with the stop pin on the inside. I'm going to disassemble the knife, so actually maybe what I ought to do is hold off on talking about the geometry till a little bit later in the video. I'm going to take this knife apart for you guys and kind of show you how I did it and my thought process as I was kind of hand working it and building it. But so let me just start off by talking about the design. So G10 on the lock, titanium on the lock side. So this is a slab of titanium. I'll show you guys the piece of titanium I start with. Hold on a second. Grab this here without ripping the mic off. So this is the piece of titanium that I bought. You can see the thickness there. So this is the titanium that plate that I start with. So I cut, you can see the pieces here that I've already cut out So this is a piece of this, and it looks thinner here because I carved it, but it's actually pretty thick. I think this is .090 thick titanium sheet right here. So again, titanium on the side here, all completely cut out by hand, and same thing on the G10 side. So it's a frame lock rather than the liner locks that I made before. So there's no liners on. It's just G10 on this side and titanium on this side. So you have a frame lock where you can actually the difference really here. Really, the only difference is that you can see the frame, and that's what's locking here versus liners on the inside. So it's super early lockup. It's very, very solid. No issues with lockup. I purposely tried to go with a fairly early lockup because it allows you to make a lighter lock bar, which is important when you're doing a thumb stud opener, because it's not writing on, this one's not writing on bearings. This is writing on nylon washers. So inherently it's never going to flip as well as it would with bearings. So the lighter pressure you can use on your lock, the better. The easier it's going to open. And this one opens and closes really easy, even though it's riding on nylon washers. I mean, I can thumb stud open this. That's how good it is, and that's pretty good for being on nylon. So I carved both the G10 side and the titanium side to kind of match a style that I have been doing for several months now. So for those of you who follow me on either my YouTube channel, Facebook, or Instagram, you know that I started out doing customizations, and one of the early things that I did in my customizations was this carving work here. I got a couple samples of my work that I've done in the past. So this is a hate pig, and you can see I carved and flamed this hate pig, and I did a kind of a rope work on the edges there. You can see the carving in there, so it ends up kind of looking like a jeweled rope along the edge, which looks really nice. And you'll notice on this, I did the exact same thing on this knife. So you can see the rope work on the spine of the blade there. I did carving into the blade. I did all this carving I did before heat treat, and this is done just on a grinding wheel by hand. All of this is completely done by hand. On the titanium, I did this using a Scotch-Brite wheel. Because the handle, this titanium, is only .090, I had to be real careful. On a grinding wheel, that will disappear really fast. So on the handles, on the titanium handle side, I just used a Scotch-Brite wheel. On the steel blade, I went ahead and used a grinding wheel, and then from the grinding wheel take it to a 3M sanding wheel so that it gives a nice finish to it. And then same thing on the G10 side. G10 is very easy to carve. I just use a Scotch-Brite wheel, and you just touch it ever so gently, and it just disintegrates the G10. So that's really easy, and you can see that that's carved as well. I didn't do the inside on the G10. I did both sides on the titanium. You can see there I actually carved both sides of the titanium. On the G10, I only carved the presentation side, because if I would have carved both sides, it would have ended up way too thin. This is actually a piece of Damascus steel. So I've got it right off camera here. Here's my Damascus. You can see I cut this corner out. This is what I used for the backspacer. So the backspacer came out of this piece of Damascus, and then I etched it after I was done. So the pocket clip I didn't create from scratch. I ordered this pocket clip so that I could just attach it to the knife. But what I did do is I did do a little bit of carving into this pocket clip, and I polished it and I flamed it. So this titanium has been heat flame anodized using a torch by hand, and that's how I got the colors. So blue around the edges, a little bit of light blue around the edges, and then bronze copperish color in the middle. So let's go ahead and take this apart. Oh, one other thing is I showed you guys the pig and how I did the carving on the pig. You may have seen this knife on my channel before. This is one of the fixed blades that I made, and this has my carving in it as well. You can see the style that I've done is the same as my folder, so you can see that carving is something that I do quite a bit. And so there's a video on this on my YouTube channel if you haven't seen. This is one of my fixed blades. And then over here you see another knife that I'm working on for a customer. This is carved as, this is a layer G10 as well. It's thicker. You can see this was 0.25 thickness, but I carved this one. This handle, this G10 is carbon fiber and orange G10 layered. You can see the different colors and the layers there. Okay. So let me go ahead and take this knife apart and I'll show you guys how I built it. So fairly easy to take apart and disassemble. Pivot screw. This is the stop pin. It goes all the way through. And then I got 2 screws in the back here holding the back spacer on. These are countersunk, even though it might not look like they are countersunk by much. Okay, so we got the knife completely apart. Here's the titanium. As I said, you can see I did carve right along. I just limited it to very, very edge because when it's assembled. So on this side, you can see the carving goes in, you know, a fair amount into the titanium because you can see that and it looks nice. On the back side, I only carved right along the top edge because I was after that rope look, and there's no reason to remove rigidity and along the titanium edge. There was no reason to remove any more titanium. This is a lock bar relief cut in the side here, and what that does is it makes it easier to release the lock bar if you relieve some of that there. So you'll find that's pretty standard on most knives. And then again, as I said, flamed. Here's the G10 slab. As I said, no carving on this one on the inside, only on the outside. So what I wanted to talk about for a minute, for those of you who are interested in how the knife geometry works, let me go ahead and put the pivot in and the stop pin, and then we'll go ahead and put the blade on. So what I wanted to show you guys was the idea here is that this shoulder right here, I'll turn this over so you can see it a little better. The shoulder pin right here makes contact, as you can see when you open it. You gotta be careful not to cut my fingers. This does have a very sharp edge on it. But when you open the knife, this stop pin hits the shoulder of the back side of this blade right there and stops it. And that's at the same time the lock has to slide over onto the lock face. So if I push this over, and you'll hear, you see it snaps in, and that's what keeps it open. So you have this is what's stopping the blade, and then from going any more in this direction, and then the lock bar stops you from being able to close it in the other direction. Okay. So that's the whole idea of how the geometry works, right? Okay, now when you go to close, when the knife goes to close all the way, the blade is making contact with the stop pin in the opposite direction right here, and that's what's holding the blade, stopping the blade from going any further in this direction. And then what's happening on the other side here as well is this detent ball right here. There's the detent ball right there. That detent ball is hitting this detent ball hole right here, and it's keeping it, and the lock bar is pushing pressure against that detent ball. It's holding the knife, the blade closed. But what's actually stopping it from closing anymore is this stop pin. So the stop pin here serves a dual purpose. It serves the purpose of stopping the blade when you close it, and stopping the blade when you open it. So the stop pin serves a dual purpose. Now, you can move this stop pin around in all different places, and as I said, on a flipper, you've got to move the stop pin way out in the front over here because you've got this big tab sticking up right here, right? And if you could imagine a big tab sticking out, if you were to close this, you'd hit it right about there. So your option is to have your tab sticking down here, and you could mill out a giant pocket. But the easiest way to do it is just to move this stop pin all the way to the front of the handle, so that when it's in the down position here, your flipper tab is right here hitting up against your stop pin. So the challenge that presents is, because it's way out here, as you go to rotate this, you can see you're going to hit right there, you're going to hit the blade. So you got to chew away all the steel on the blade here, or mill a big pocket in so that you can clear that. And so it just creates a smaller contact area. So when you build a knife like this, one of the advantages that you can see is, look at all the steel that's still left out here. There's a massive amount of steel that you get when you're doing this type of design without having a flipper tab. So when the knife is in the open position and sandwiched together, you've got a lot of overlap here, more so than you would get with most flippers. Now, the way a lot of knife makers have got around that issue is by milling a channel into the blade right here and putting the stop pin right next to the pivot so that it rides inside a little channel here, and then you can still have all this larger area of geometry. The challenge with that is I don't have a CNC mill, and milling out a half circle channel using a manual mill is no easy feat, and it's not something that I'm really equipped to do right now. So this is a great way to build a folder without having CNC equipment, so that you still get that massive overlap here in that overbuilt folder. So as far as going back to, the thought process around the flippers, another solution that I found is, and what a lot of makers who aren't doing CNC is they're milling out half a pocket on each side. And I've actually done that a little bit. Let's see if I have one of those blades around here where you can see what I'm talking about. Yeah, here we go. So you can see here, you see I'm starting to mill a little bit of a notch in here. So what you're doing is you're keeping a larger area, contact area back here, and you're milling out what in essence becomes part of that channel without having to use a CNC. So that's one way around that. So anyway, let me put this back together while I've got you guys on camera here. See, it goes together pretty quick. Put the pivot in, get that started. Put the stop pin screw in. Okay, now what I found the best way to do this back here is to take this backspacer, here's the little backspacer, is to just start off with putting the front screw in by itself and leave this kind of sticking out like that. Put this screw in, get it started, and then rotate this and line up the back hole. And I'll talk a little bit about how what I did is I tapped the titanium on the back side, so the screw's going through the back spacer into the titanium, which has been tapped to be the threads for these screws for the back spacer. And then we'll just do very light on the stop pin. And then as far as the way I do break the lock open a little bit, tighten down the pivot to where it's pretty tight, and then back it off just to where it starts to make pressure. And then that gives you a good fold. And then you have to check for center up, and then tighten the pivot a little bit more till the blade is right at where you want it to be for center up. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so that is the latest folder. This one is for myself. I did this one as a design test because I wanted to build a thumb stud folder, and I wanted to build one with this new geometry design. I wanted to test out this new geometry design. I didn't come up with this. There's a lot of folders that use this same design, but I wanted to try out this backwards set stop pin design for the folder, and I definitely like it. I think it's definitely easier than doing bearings, because with bearings you have to mill pockets either into the liners or into the blade. So as I showed you on one of my previous knives, there's a pockets milled into each side of the blade back here. So that's extra work, and if you screw that up, if those aren't exactly set in correctly, you'll have flipper issues. You don't have to worry about that when you're doing it with a thumb stud opener like this, because it's not riding on on bearings, it's riding on nylon washers. So, the disadvantage, of course, is if you're into flippers, it's not a flipper, it's a thumb stud opener. But if you don't mind, if you're okay with a thumb stud opener, then these are a nice way to go. The design's a little simpler, the geometry is a little bit simpler, and it's a little bit easier to build. And then the other thing I wanted to do was do a custom carved knife, and I wanted to go with some unique blade shapes and a little bit of a unique handle shape. So I got a real swedge on the blade there, a real long belly, and I think the lines flow really nice. It goes up and then back down again. And if you're holding it in your hand, you can see it's a very comfortable knife, and you've got a nice blade shape for using the knife. So that's a new design of mine. I can make these, now that I've got this kind of as a template, making more of these would not be an issue. I'm going to make some more of these later, and I've already ordered much thicker titanium than this. So I've got 0.125 titanium. This is 0.090. I've got 0.125 titanium on the way. I've got 0.125 G10 on the way. I can also do titanium on both sides, so 0.125 titanium on both sides. And then I have thicker steel than this as well as the Damascus steel, which is quite a bit thicker than the steel in this knife. This is quite a bit thicker, so I'm going to be making some knives out of this. So looking forward to making another version of this exact knife using thicker titanium, and that one I'll probably do titanium on both sides, so it'll be a full tie folder. And then I'll use that Damascus steel as the blade, so the blade will be quite a bit thicker than this one as well. So I think that's going to come out really nice, and it's going to look neat. But I think this is a nice design. This design's probably going to be a keeper for me. I'm going to probably give this particular style a name. I initially thought of something, I think it kind of looks like a claw, like a velociraptor claw or something. So maybe call it a velociraptor. I'm really giving it a whole lot of thought. So if you have a suggestion on what I should name this knife, let me know. But I think the design is pretty cool. So get you guys back here to where you can see me. As I'll sign off here. Okay. So that is the latest blade out of my workshop, and I've got to knock out a customer knife, so that'll be on a project for me this weekend, is finishing up the knife using this carbon fiber and G10 orange G10 combo. That's what this is. Got the liners already close to being finished. Got the blade pretty close to being finished. So this one I should be able to, I'm thinking I should be able to get this one, hopefully the plan is this one's wrapped up this weekend, and then I can get this one shipped off to the customer for that one. And then I've got another customer order that I've got to get done, and another customer order after that one I got to get done, and then back to making the next project after that, we'll be making a thicker version of this knife using the thicker titanium that I was talking about. It'll be an all tie. I'm going to make a Damascus blade. I'm thinking about, I think it would look really neat to carve up like this, carve up Damascus. So take this Damascus billet here, cut the steel out of this, and then carve this, because for those of you who know Damascus, this is layered, where all of the 2 layers, different types of steel are all layered through here. So you could imagine carving this up and then etching it will create a very unique design in the blade with the different layers coming through the carving. So I think that's going to look pretty cool. So let me know what you think of this design. What do you think of the carving on the blade? What do you think of the spine work there? I think it looks pretty neat. And as you probably recall from my Meet the Maker video that I did about a week ago, I had said that I wanted to make some knives that were different than all the knives that are out there. Get some weird shadows here. I wanted to make some knife designs that were different than what everyone else is doing. I didn't want to just make a whole bunch of knives that look like everybody else's knife. And I think this one kind of is moving in that direction for me, making a knife that doesn't really look like anything else that's out there that I'm aware of. I didn't, the funny thing about this is I didn't sit down and draw this knife out. What I did is I started with, what I usually do is I'll take a knife like this one, for example, and I'll use the swedge, the shape of the swedge here, and I'll lay this down on the steel, and I just trace around, and I kind of move the lines as I go on this right onto the steel, and then with a Sharpie. And then if I don't like the way it looks, I just, when you're steel on a Sharpie, you just take a little WD-40 and it comes right off. And then you move it a little bit, and then you move it a little bit more, and eventually you end up with a blade shape that looks kind of interesting, and that's exactly how I came to this blade shape. And then I cut that out of my blank on my bandsaw, and then I take it over to my bench grinder, my 2x72 grinder, and I start grinding it out, putting the final shape of the blade on the grinder and watching it as I go. And I end up just working the steel to the blade steel to a shape that looks nice to my eye as I'm on the grinder and moving the blade around, moving the steel around and getting a shape. It's like, okay, this angle looks like it should swoop a little bit more, so I just work it a little bit more on the bench grinder to get that angle that my eye thinks looks kind of neat. And then when I'm finished and the blade is totally done, I then make the handles around the blade. So I take the blade and I lay it down onto the titanium. I trace it onto the titanium. And it's like, okay, the pivot's going to go over here, and I need to have enough space to clear. When I close it, I got to have enough space for a backspacer. I have to have it be deep enough to not have the blade sticking out and all that. And so, you're like, okay, the line has to kind of follow the blade. You don't want to have a swoop here and have some weird looking shape out here. So it kind of like form follows function. And so I end up tracing out the blade shape and designing the handles to encase the blade and leave space for the backspacer, the pivot, and so forth, and then put a finger cutout in here and all that. So that's how I design the knife. It's just kind of all as I go. And I really like to work that way because you end up with a knife that looks totally unique, and you don't know what you're going to kind of end up with until you're done. And I suppose the risk might be that you might end up with a knife that looks bad, but you might end up with something, I think, that looks really interesting. And you certainly can't say it looks like something else because you didn't know what you were going to end up with when you started. So with that said, I will close this video off. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find me on Facebook. My name is Richard Kloc. Last name is spelled K-L-O-C. And on Instagram, I am on Instagram as RichMade Knives. Thank you, and check me out on the next video. I will be showing off that next knife that I'm making, and then we'll be doing some more knife reviews. I've got a Medford Dress Marauder coming in tomorrow that I will be shooting a video on once I receive that knife. And I've got a couple of other knives in my collection that I've recently acquired that I want to do reviews on as well. So subscribe to my channel and you can check all those knife reviews out. So thanks, Richard with RichMade Knives.